now.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tacoma Community College Student Government Candidate Forum. I'd like to thank both the candidates and the audience for taking the time to participate today. I am Deanna George, Vice President of Legislation and Records for the Associated Students of Tacoma Community College, and I will be your moderator. But before we begin, we will have a few words from TCC President, Dr. Ivan Harrell.
All right, thank you, Deanna, and welcome everyone. Want to thank
Maybe
you
you can
all.
unmute Dr. Harrell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Let me see, Sonia, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank
Yes,
you.
I can.
Okay. So want to thank everyone for participating today. I'm so excited because this is something that was thought of by the students at TCC, organized with conjunction with the League for Women Voters. And so anything that is student-led is exciting for me because we get an opportunity to hear directly from them the questions that they may have for candidates and legislators. And I definitely want to thank the candidates and the legislators for participating today. I know a couple of you spent time with presidents and trustees of Pierce County Community and Technical Colleges just on Monday. And I hope that what you all will see is that students, faculty, and staff at TCC are very, very interested in what each of you have to say in regards to the support of the college, and most important, the support of our students, because they are your constituents. And so thank you. We know each of you have a very, very busy schedule and have all kinds of events because you're in the throes of campaign season, but we are very, very grateful to you and want to thank Deanna and President Melissa Littleton and the whole team for organizing this today.
Thank you, Dr. Harrell. And before we go any further, I would like the student panel who will be asking the questions this afternoon to introduce themselves. And we will start with Melissa Littleton.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Littleton, and I am the president of the Associated Students of Tacoma Community College.
Hi, my name is Carter Archuleta, and I'm the Vice President of Financing Clubs for the ASTCC.
Hi, my name is Ivy Tran. I am the ASTC Secretary.
Thank you, student government team. So this forum is for the general election, which is November 3rd. The candidates today are from the 28th Legislative District, and they include Senate candidate Tawana Nobles. Steve Oban, her opponent, was not able to be here. House of Representatives Position 1 candidates, Kevin Ballard and Mari Levitt. And House of Representatives Position 2 candidate, Dan Bernosky. His opponent, Chris Nye, was unable to be here. Our timekeeper is Sonia Morgan, Director of Student Engagement, and she will keep the candidates informed of when they have 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and when it is time to stop. And when they see the card that says stop, they may finish a short sentence. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. These will be given in alphabetical order. After that, the order of answering questions will rotate with 30 seconds for each candidate. All candidates will be asked the same questions and will have the same time to answer. At the end, closing statements may be up to 1 minute and will be given in reverse order of the opening statements. So now we'll move on to the opening statements, and we will begin with Dan Bernosky.
Okay.
Hi, thanks everyone for having me. I appreciate your time. I'm Dan Bernosky, and I'm running for position 2 here in the 28th District. I've served my community as a firefighter for the past 20 years with Lakewood, University Place, and now West Pierce Fire and Rescue. And before my career in the fire service, I served in the Army National Guard for 6 years. And for the past 12 years, I've served my local West Pierce firefighters as their vice president of political action, where I was a advocate for firefighters and working families here locally and in Olympia. We're facing a lot of unprecedented challenges, which, I know needs no explanation. I mean, the state's facing a budget shortfall. We're still dealing with COVID. We're in the grips of the third wave, a third spike in COVID cases, if you will. And, it's going to be a huge daunting challenge, especially since there's been so many failures at the federal level. So we're going to have to work that much harder and work together locally here at the state level to, address a lot of the issues where the federal government failed. So what I mean by that is having better access to personal protective equipment for healthcare workers, first responders, and frontline workers. Making sure that when someone does get sick, whether it's COVID or something else through no fault of their own because they're at work, workplace protections are in place so that way they know they can get back to work healthily and safely and as quickly as possible. And, this issue has just exacerbated other issues that are pressing our community in our area. And I'm talking about homelessness. I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about housing affordability, just a ton of issues that have only been compounded. And, certainly I don't want to forget, our past failures to adequately address racial inequities and socioeconomic inequities in our community and here at the state. So what I'm looking to do is work as part of a team to come up with some good solutions to a lot of these pressing issues. And I look forward to speaking with all of you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And now Kevin Ballard.
Well, thank you, TCC, for the invitation today. This is exciting. I'm Kevin Ballard. I'm your position 1 candidate for the 28th Legislative District Representative. I'm a military veteran of 23 years, active Army service, and I was a Chinook helicopter pilot. And most of that time was in special operations. I served, in combat, and I appreciate that at TCC, there are many veterans there looking for post-military transition to civilian life. Prior to my military service, I was a law enforcement officer in Northern California. I live in DuPont with my sweetheart and my 2 dogs and 2 cats. I volunteer and hold memberships in the American Legion, Military Officers Association of America, and the Military Order of the World Wars. I belong to Kiwanis of Steilacoom. I currently serve as the elected city council member for position 6 in DuPont, and I may soon be formally appointed to the Washington State Forensic Investigation Council. My youth was characterized by community service. I volunteered in soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and mental health facilities, working with our most vulnerable populations. I recognized then, as I do even more so now, that difficult choices must be made to prioritize those who cannot help themselves over those with resources who can. We're facing a budget shortfall, and we can't go after those who are clawing their way out, our business community and our families who couldn't get their unemployment benefits in time, with higher taxation following this COVID crisis. So I just ask that we consider this as we vote moving forward. And I'm a proven hardworking representative for my community. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. And Mari Levitt.
Good afternoon, and it's great to be with you at Tacoma Community College. It's especially great because I am a graduate of TCC and was former student body president many, many, many years ago. So helped students, kind of craft these kinds of forums. So it's really great to be with you and also be a former Titan. I'm Mari Levitt. I'm the state representative serving you and for the past 2 years. And I appreciate you putting this forum on, and to all of those of you who may be watching. Like many, I first came to Pierce County as a child in a military family. I lived several different places. And then when my father, a Vietnam War veteran, was stationed at Fort Lewis, I knew early on that this was going to be my home. And that's why I'm raising my family here and have dedicated my career to our local community and our local families and our local priorities. I've served on several different boards or commissions, whether it's the Pierce County Ethics Commission or the Pierce County Accountable Communities of Health, a member of the local advisory board of a YMCA, the University of Washington Tacoma American Humanities Committee, and several higher education institutions. And like many, like I said, I've been serving you and the beautiful 28th Legislative District since 2018. I look forward to your questions and look forward to hearing about the issues that are very important to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tawana Nobles.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited that you students are leading on your campus, hosting us today. This is such a great opportunity for me to learn more about what's important to you and how I can use my voice to be an advocate, but also more for you to learn about me. I actually moved here as a military spouse, like everyone else. Seemingly, I was a military brat, and our family just was so unstable. We experienced homelessness. I lived in shelters. Eventually, I went into foster care, but still attended college right after high school. And I stayed in foster care, and I was a teen mom at that time. When I got married, I emancipated from foster care. We were stationed here to Fort Lewis, and I jumped right in volunteering, and I started attending Tacoma Community College about 3 or 4 months after we moved here. I graduated from TCC after 1 year because I had enough credits from back home, but I also played basketball at TCC the year that for the first time in 20 years, women's basketball had gone to state. Our picture used to be in the gym, but it sounds like with all the renovations, things got moved around. But I learned about the college I transferred to at TCC. I learned about University of Puget Sound at a college fair, transferred to University of Puget Sound for my undergrad and then graduate studies. I earned a Master of Arts in Teaching and taught at Stadium High School and Lincoln High School. I'm currently the president and CEO of Tacoma Urban League, and I'm a school board director. I've been serving on the school board for the past 5 years. So I am thrilled to get to know you all today and your needs, and look forward to the questions that you'll be asking today. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for your opening statements. Before we move on to questions, I would like to remind the panelists candidates to please pay attention to our timekeeper so everyone can have equal time. Thank you. So for our questions, we will begin with Tawana Nobles, and you will have 90 seconds to answer this question.
How do your legislative priorities for 2021 serve the interest of community and technical college students?
Yeah, such a great question. I'll jump right to one of my priorities is helping the community to get through this pandemic. And I want to make sure that we can get our community back to work. And that includes college students. That includes, providing access to greener jobs, higher wages. That includes, making sure that we're helping community members who have lost their job to maybe return to school so they can learn a new trade, a new skill. But we have to get our community members back to work. Another priority that I have is making sure that we protect as many vital programs that our state budget funds. We know that as a senator, it is our job to, manage this state budget. And I want to make sure that, housing security, food security, the Washington College Grant, those things are preserved for college students and provided as resources for college students. But I want to ensure that students are able to get to work like I want every other community member. And I want to make sure that college is accessible and affordable for all of our students.
Thank you. Mari Levitt.
Thank you for the question. I currently serve as Vice Chair of College and Workforce Development Committee, and that's working with our State Board of Community and Technical Colleges across our state, as well as our public institutions and the independent colleges of Washington, making sure that we are hearing from our CTC system and especially students who have come down to testify to talk about the issues that have been important to them. And I think there are a few items that I'll continue to work on and started working on when I was elected, and that has to do with emergency services, whether it's food security or whether it's one bill away from being homeless and having a grant to our fund to be able to assist students. Housing continues to be an issue, and making sure that we're focusing on affordable housing for our community and technical college students to access. The other thing is behavioral health is so important in our community and technical colleges and beyond. But students need access to counselors and need access to services in a timely way and in a way that makes sense for them. Transit, making sure that there are routes that students can get to and from campus and to and from their jobs is critically important. And then I'll say that finally, just maintaining the programs that we have. It's going to be a really tough budget year, and the Workforce Investment Act did a great many things, but making sure that we're maintaining that level of funding to be able to serve students in the way that they need to be served will be a priority for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin Ballard?
Thanks. So for me, looking at the economy right now and our graduating student population, our college students, I think what's important is that there are careers waiting for them upon graduation. And the landscape right now in this region is technology based. Those jobs by and large are being filled by many from outside the region. It's kind of scary when you think about it, that we're bringing in so many people from out of state, out of country to fill viable positions here that should be filled by our college students that are studying right now in our own post-secondary education. So I want to make sure that our legislative priorities align the opportunities for our students so that they are pre-positioned for these well-paying careers in our high-tech sector locally. As far as my other priority legislatively would be for our veteran community and ensure that the landscape is there for them and their families to attend post-secondary education or trade schools so that their families can continue to contribute here locally in the Puget Sound. That also includes making sure that we have great childcare opportunities for these families, because we know that dual income families are the middle class that basically makes such a great experience here in our Puget Sound region. So those would be my priorities, and thank you.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky?
Thank you. So we need to continue to make sure that past commitments to investments for community colleges when it comes to infrastructure at the colleges themselves, following through on the grants that Washington State had already dedicated to local community colleges and technical colleges is very important. And then speaking of infrastructure, we need to continue to make those kinds of infrastructure investments in transportation, so that way you as students have better access to public transportation, make sure that you're able to safely and efficiently get to school. We need to make sure that students get the assistance that they need when it comes to local and affordable housing, make sure that nutritional needs are met, make sure all of your basic needs are met, so that way you can go out and you can learn. And something that I'm really excited to do is, based upon my past experience in labor with the organized labor movement, is to make sure that when you graduate, those good paying, preferably, jobs that will provide you a living wage with access to healthcare and benefits that you deserve once you enter the workforce are there. So that's something that I'm really proud of in my past work as an advocate for labor and working families. And that's something that I want to make sure that you have access to when you graduate from college. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Mari Levitt, and you will have 90 seconds to answer this question.
If elected, how will you engage with students during the legislative session?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I really enjoyed this past term. As like I mentioned, I was vice chair of college and workforce development, and we had several student lobbyists representing the public baccalaureate institutions, representing the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges. In fact, one of your own, former Titan and student body president, was down in Olympia as she did an internship with the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges, testifying. I met with several students in my office to talk about the issues that were important to them. And many of the bills that came or were introduced this past term came from students saying that they're interested in these issues of behavioral health, or they're interested in issues of housing, or they're interested in issues of emergency services or wraparound services. or they're interested in, expansion of career and technical education. So I'll continue to engage students in that work and in all the work that I do, and look forward to those partnerships that really were instrumental into getting some bills across the finish line. So thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
Just to be clear, the question said students, so I'm not going to isolate it to just the post-secondary students, but everyone in our education system as it relates to the relationship with our legislative representatives. I think our PAGE program at the Capitol is a wonderful program to get students interested in government, to see how legislation is passed, how committees work. I think that I look forward to working with the PAGEs in that respect. Second of all, student lobbyists with the legislators are a phenomenal resource to find out what exactly are the most important issues facing students at the various campuses. And lastly, I think it's important for me to get outside of Olympia and go and attend student government meetings and find out exactly, what's going on at the college level. I mean, when I went to college, I was active in student government. I was involved in the entertainment side of things. They called it the program board, but I was involved in student government, and we never had anybody from our state government come and speak with us about, hey, how can I help you, or what things are important for you? So that would be something I look forward to doing with students at local post-secondary institutions. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. So I think as a past connections to figure out a way to, not only for me to hear your voice, but for me to hopefully provide a little bit of guidance, perhaps, if needed, when it comes to advocating for yourselves and for your fellow students with other legislators and electeds. I think that's going to be really important, and I think you'll see a lot of value out of being your own best advocate. So thank you again for the question.
Thank you. Tawana Nobles.
Thank you. And students are my absolute favorite. Obviously, I'm a mother. I have 4 children. 3 of them are home, remote learning, but I'm also a university place school board director. And so my job is to look out for our students and make sure that they have the most equitable and quality educational experience in our district. So I create and monitor policy that will ensure that experience. I also will continue funding the education of students at Tacoma Community College. I started the Tawana Nobles Young Professional Scholarship, and this year we have now funded the education of 4 students who attend Tacoma Community College. And so I will continue fundraising for that scholarship and helping students to be in school learning so they can be, contributing citizens to this community as well as college educated. I also have a really great relationship with WASN, Washington Student Engagement Network. I actually, the last couple of years, have been a speaker working with their students, doing advocacy. I wrote some postcards to legislators advocating for the Washington College Scholarship. I'm also at Tacoma Urban League. We have brought on interns from Tacoma Community College, but I hire college students. This year, my assistant is a brand new college graduate. So I'm going to help to put students to work or allow them opportunities to shadow in the industry, especially if they're interested in nonprofit. And I'll maintain my relationship with folks like Dr. Harrell. I'll make sure I'm talking to the college to figure out the needs of the students and working hard to help to meet those needs.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Kevin Ballard, and you will have 90 seconds to answer this question.
The State Board of Community and Technical Colleges made a commitment to lead with racial equity in light of inequitable higher education policy, which have negatively impacted BIPOC students' secondary education completion rates. Would you support funding specifically for addressing equity gaps in education?
Yeah, sad but true. The equity of outcomes in our both public K through 12 as well as our post-secondary education is not what it should be. And I would fully support measures that create a level landscape for every student in this state. I would oppose any legislation that would prioritize any groups over others. And I just think that this state really needs to work harder on this whole disparity we're seeing right now with this COVID crisis. I mean, some communities are afforded certain opportunities and others are not, just by virtue of their zip code. We can't have this continue. And it will be my charge, and with a laser focus, that I will approach every piece of legislation that specifically targets our education centers with that eye on equity of outcome, because it's very important. We've seen some legislative initiatives recently targeting affirmative action and such. And as long as stuff remains with the ultimate goal of creating a level playing field, you'll find my name associated with it.
Thank you. And Dan Bernosky.
Yeah, so this is going to be, so we all recognize that there are disparities between students of color, BIPOC students, and white students because of inequities that are in place that have been there for generations, and they continue to interfere with an equitable learning environment for BIPOC students. So that obviously is an issue. So yes, I'm very supportive of figuring out ways to assist the stakeholders themselves in finding ways to address these inequities. I recognize that I don't have the sole solution. I Dan Bernosky, don't have the one magic switch that's going to fix inequity in the United States of America, and certainly in our community, in the educational community. So that's why I recognize that it's going to be my job to listen to you to figure out to address these inequities and make things more equitable, not inequitable. So I think, this is something that, the state board, the state equity board could have a role to play in being laser focused on coming up with really good policy to figure out a way to address these issues. So that way everybody has a great opportunity when they graduate from college, and they have the ability to learn while they're in college and come back to, So anyway, I know my time's up there, but yeah, absolutely. I support equity for all students.
Thank you. Tawana Nobles.
My answer is yes. I will support all efforts to make sure that everyone in this state is experiencing equitable outcomes. I would do everything to be anti-racist in my own work. It's what we do at Tacoma Urban League to make sure that we are helping our community to be anti-Black racist, that we are dismantling racist, oppressive systems all throughout our state, which includes our academic and educational systems. It's so important not just to get students in college, but for them to also graduate and be able to have an enjoyable experience. I attended the University of Puget Sound, as I mentioned, after I left Tacoma Community College, which is far less diverse. And one thing that we always talk about is it's so important to do everything that we can to make sure that students across our state see professors that look like them, have curriculum that talks about their experiences, and that their stories and experiences are validated on campus, that we're honest about those disparities and the blatant racism that's experienced even on the college campus. And that's from, other students or by other students, and also admin on many of our college campuses. So I want to be an avid supporter to dismantle those systems, and we'll make sure that we're putting money behind it, starting with our Office of Equity.
Thank you. Mari Levitt.
Absolutely. And I was proud to co-sponsor the Office of Equity bill, and we're hiring the first administrator, and the announcement is out. And I wrote my master's thesis many, many years ago, I think about 25 years ago now, on Native American students and a longitudinal study of Native American students in Washington State's community and technical colleges, because our Native American students, their retention rates weren't high and persistence rates were high. And that continues to be a challenge. I wrote grants for environmental assessments for our students of color at the community colleges, both at Tacoma Community College and Pierce College, because I knew that students of color were saying that the services that they needed weren't prevalent, and assessing those from a student lens, and brought in folks from all across the country to focus on issues of our students of color and LGBTQ community as well, making sure that those students' voices are heard, and not only heard, but that they're part of the committees and the makeup that make the decisions on our college campuses. So I'll continue to do that work. I've done that in our legislature by several bills that I've co-sponsored, and we'll continue to do that work. And even in the interim, met with the Tacoma Urban League last year and reached out to Ms. Tawana Nobles to talk about the importance of our community in the 28th legislative district, and how to serve all voices and make sure that their voices are at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Tawana Nobles, and you will have 90 seconds to answer this question.
Washington State is experiencing significant financial impacts as a result of COVID-19. If elected, what would you do to promote job growth as we recover from the negative impacts of COVID-19 and graduating students begin looking for work?
Thank you. I will do a lot of the things that we are doing now. I mean, one, as a senator, again, we get to impact legislation. And so I want to make sure that we have funding going towards workforce development, but I also want to be supportive of what I know we're doing on the ground. So at Tacoma Urban League, in the middle of this pandemic, we launched a young adult employment program. So during this pandemic, hi, so cute. During this pandemic, we got folks to work. We trained them on construction skills so that they can learn a trade. I also know that we'll continue helping community members with resumes, connecting them to jobs directly. We also have worked so hard helping small businesses. So in the beginning, we were helping with PPP. Now we're helping with a variety of funding opportunities, from federal all the way down to state and non-traditional funding opportunities. But it's so critical to make sure that we are helping people get to work. And we have lots of agencies doing really incredible work to help out during COVID-19. So we need to continue making sure we use COVID relief dollars for workforce development. We need to provide training and access to training, making sure that we're opening doors for community members. And simply, I have just straight up hired folks. I hired about 4 people during COVID. I created and wrote brand new job descriptions so I can get folks, especially people of color and Black folks in particular, to work in the middle of this pandemic. So anything in my power that I can do, even if it's creating a job to make sure someone is earning a salary instead of, being unemployed and homeless, I'm going to do it.
Thank you. Mari Levitt.
And thank you for the question. Since we got out of session and since COVID hit, I was a co-sponsor of the bill that infused $200 million. And looking back now, we realize, gosh, that wasn't even near enough for the economic impact that we've had, but I've been working on this issue. I'm part of our economic recovery team in our caucus, and leading with other legislators to meet with industry and raise their voices to the governor's office, and to ensure that they're working hand in hand with the health department to be able to open up their businesses with public safety and public health in mind. I've continued to work with our community and technical colleges and our post-secondary education institutions to find out ways where they can keep their programs strong. And a good example of that is the CTC system able to open up certain programs that were more hands-on, like nursing, to be able for folks to be able to graduate and move on and get the jobs that they need. And so expanding our career-connected learning opportunities, dual enrollment programs, and reducing some of those fees for students. And then also I instigated an opportunity. Our Department of Licensing was about to raise fees on our small businesses, and I was able to, working with the governors and working with other folks, stop that and pause that until after session because our businesses are already hurt. So there have been a variety of different things I've done since I got out of session, and we'll continue to raise those voices of small businesses in the session as we move forward, and our workers and their families.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
Okay, the historical examples of how to recover from economic recession or hardship facing this budget shortfall specifically: deregulation, lower taxes, lower fees. And we have something else right now where certifications from other parts of the country are not getting reciprocity here in our state. So let's say an HVAC person comes to our state and wants to work and help in our economy and maybe even start a business here. They have to go and they have to get recertified here in our state, even after having a successful business in another state, in another trade, with a certification from another state. It carries over to such things as salons and beauticians, but I'd like to see a level playing field with regards to that. That'll help grow our economy quickly. I want to make sure that what happened post-COVID never happens again in Washington state. We should never be in this position again. One of the things I'd like to do as a legislator is to ensure that the executive authority is better refined. So we can't go this long with no legislative session. I want some codified legislation that says the legislature must meet within so many days of a declared emergency, so they can stave off these sorts of budget shortfalls and nip them in the bud. There's estimates that we could have saved up to $2 billion if the legislature had met earlier. Right now, we're at 5, and I think that's better than the original projections, but we can do better, and those are my ideas.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Thanks. So I think one of the best things that we can do to continue to promote job growth is to make sure that people are able to go back to work safely. And I think I mentioned this during my introduction piece, but I really mean having those workplace protections in place. So that way, one, we as workers aren't afraid to go to work, and two, aren't being forced to go to work in an unsafe environment. And 3, that's what is going to allow businesses and healthcare providers and educators, that's going to allow us to literally get back to work. So again, the manufacturing piece with personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. And the reason I bring that up is, I'm fortunate, very fortunate to have been able to go to the dentist last week. And I asked them how they were doing, with their personal protective equipment stocks. And they're still scrambling to have adequate access to basic needs: gloves, N95 masks, HEPA filters. So if that's just one dentist office that is competing with other healthcare providers for this much needed PPE, I think that's going to be a huge piece to the puzzle. And like I said before, making sure that you can go to work safely, that you feel safe at work. And then, of course, if something happens to where we get sick or injured on the job, you and I are taken care of, so that way we can get back to work healthy and as quickly as possible. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Mari Levitt.
Given the importance of broadband internet service for students and businesses and the shortage of broadband service in this district, what role should the state play in assuring that affordable broadband is available to all residents?
That has been the significant challenge for parents and families alike. I'm a mom with 3 kids at home, and they're all online, and as am I working, as is my husband working, and across our district, it's been really a tremendous challenge for families to have the technology that they need, and school districts are fronting the incredible expense right now of Chromebooks and of making sure that kids have access to hotspots. And unfortunately, that's not the ideal way to learn, is when they're intermittent access. I've been on Zoom meetings where calls have dropped out because I've had to go to different parts of the house to make it work. And when kids are learning, that's not how we want to have it, or students as well and their families. And so we've worked on making sure that we're trying to get dollars and CARES Act dollars to our school districts to help them offset some of those costs that they're doing. We've worked with utility companies and others to help to have them help those families who don't have access to broadband or internet access to get basic services to be able to do that. And I'm also on the Capital Budget Committee and helped, work on broadband issues, both from the creating the Office of Broadband recently this past term to working on, whether broadband should be a public utility. And that's been part of a conversation recently to make sure that everyone has access, whether they're rural or urban, to, incredible access services to be able to do the learning that they need to do and have their families get to work.
Thank you, Kevin Ballard.
Thank you. I've just recently written a piece for the Suburban Times directly kind of speaking to legislation that's currently in committee that would provide direct stipends to families who wish to get better outcomes for their kids and be able to afford things like broadband internet. I'm not opposed to making broadband a public utility so the access would be there, but the actual technology would cost money for these families. And we shouldn't necessarily restrict the outcomes, the equitable outcomes, to those that can afford things. So this legislation in the Education Committee right now would give a $15,000 grant or stipend to families so they could pursue either homeschool or private education for their families. I see an amendment being put forth for people based on income levels to be able to afford the technology, gaining access to broadband internet. So I know that the legislators are working on this. And like I said previously, this is a big focus of mine because equity of outcome is everything for our public education system. And we need to make sure everybody can afford the same tools so they get the same opportunity.
Thank you, Dan Bernosky.
Thanks. Yeah, there's no question that broadband affordability is an absolute issue for all of us. And again, this is one of those things that exacerbates inequality amongst students, amongst families, amongst our society, and that's going to be a real challenge. So yeah, this is something that we absolutely need to tackle. Let me rewind a little bit. When I pursued higher education over the past 5-10 years, I pretty much earned my entire degree for the most part online, and that has been the norm for a long time. I mean, this is nothing new. This is nothing that comes as a surprise. But the challenge is, how do we make this a priority? How do we invest, because we need to invest in infrastructure to put broadband in place, not only in our own community, but certainly rural communities. We want to make sure that they don't face inequities based upon them having to live in a rural community. So yeah, it's an absolute huge issue. I mean, you absolutely need the internet to function in modern society, no question, full stop. So this is something that I, absolutely will look at very critically to figure out a way to make broadband affordable and accessible to everyone in our community. And it's going to be a huge challenge, but I'm willing to step up and take a swing at it.
Thank you. Tawana Nobles.
Thank you. Such a great question. So what I know I will do is work really hard to make sure that broadband, that internet access is a public utility. I'll work closely with Senator Wellman, who also feels the same way on the issue, to make sure that our families are not having this experience. I've dropped a few links in a chat box for panelists and attendees, but I'm also sharing my family's experience where on the first day of school, I called our internet provider to change our plan because my kids couldn't download, upload. It was taking 15 minutes to get into class. And I've been on the phone with Comcast talking about what we can do. And so at Tacoma Urban League, we all went through an Internet Essentials training to make sure that we know how to walk families through accessing the least expensive broadband service at Comcast. I also criticize Comcast for that service not being up to par with what I know I can provide my own family, that we're paying for about 600 megabits per second, and that plan gives about 25 megabits per second. So I want affordable plans, but I also want what families have access to be quality and what I would purchase for my own family. We have been also working with Graduate Tacoma, sending individuals to Graduate Tacoma because that's where they can get their broadband paid for. So we want community members not to have to face that burden. And we've just been buying laptops, buying headphones, doing everything that we can to provide that access. And I've been in the ears of our elected leaders to say that this is unjust. Internet access is essential and not something that's a luxury just to watch Netflix. We need to work and we need to learn, and everyone needs to have access now.
Thank you. For our next question, we will begin with Kevin Ballard, and you will have 90 seconds to answer.
Due to the revenue shortfall in Washington state, public institutions are facing significant budget cuts. How you work to ensure that higher education does not bear the brunt of the coming budget cuts?
When we consider that some of the highest paid employees of the state work in higher education, albeit in the sports arena, there's room there to ensure that our post-secondary education maintains their current level of funding. It's not something that if I had the opportunity to weigh a decision on, I would seek to cut. Although the governor has said across the board that he wanted to see at least 15% from all agencies, I'm not specifically familiar with what has come from the UW system or the other state schools with regards to how they have presented their cuts to the governor himself. But that would be the extent to which I would impact post-secondary education strictly based on the governor's decision. I certainly would not want to weigh in with any legislation that would further curtail or somehow cut what's currently being given to our post-secondary schools. We have the top three, we're in the top three in the nation for post-secondary education. And that's something we should be very proud of. And we need to, a part of that is the funding system for our very prestigious system here in Washington state. So I'm not going to support any cuts based on our budget shortfall for post-secondary education.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Yeah, so it is a priority of mine to make sure that higher education doesn't face the brunt of budget cuts based upon the state's upcoming, budget shortfall. So, there are grants in place. There are investments being made that have been made to make sure that you have the best facilities available, adequate access to be able to learn, especially now remotely. Those kinds of investments have already been made, and we need to make sure that they remain in place, because when we choose to have higher education bear the brunt of this budget shortfall, we lose those returns on those past investments. And it's going to be really important as the economy inevitably rebounds that you as students didn't fall behind because the state didn't meet its obligations that it should have made. Not only are we going to regress in the short term, but we're going to regress in the long term if we don't continue to make those commitments to funds when it comes to getting you back to work, or excuse me, when you graduate, get to work, get that good living wage job, and start participating in the economy and helping us rebound as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So it would be very short-sighted for us to force the brunt of the budget shortfall on higher education, and that's not something that I support.
Thank you. Tawana Nobles.
Thank you. I want to work hard to preserve important programs and important funds such as education. I mean, I truly believe that our state budget funds vital programs, but I do know as we talk about, budget cuts, there will be cuts. I heard Speaker Jenkins say in our call earlier this week with the colleges, don't ask for any more money because we won't have any, but we can work really hard to make sure education isn't cut. We can be strong voices. We can also, bring to the forefront student voices, current college student voices who, in our own voice, my own voice, as I talk about, what it was like as a college student, how important education was, how it helped to break cycles, and how I went from someone that was experiencing homelessness and foster care with two parents, I did not graduate from college, to a CEO and someone that's able to run for state senate. So I want those opportunities for everyone. And I think it is important to do things like, reforming our regressive tax system, to do things like, hiring freezes. But we also have to pay close attention to the rhetoric around these special sessions. And we could have made some of these cuts because what we could have cut too early might have cost us $1 now, but $8 in the future. And education, I believe, is one of those vital cuts that seems like, oh, we can cut now. No, it's vital. It's vital, so we have to protect it. So I'll do everything in my power to be a strong voice in protecting education, the funding that allows, students like me to be able to have gone to school, and students like you to be able to go to school, although I don't know your funding sources, so you could be paying it straight out of pocket, but for lots of students who need that money that comes out of our state budget.
Thank you, Mari Levitt.
Thank you. We saw what happens to post-secondary education and what happens to programs that are offered for folks who are going for worker retraining and have out of interest or necessity, or students coming straight out of high school back in our last recession. And we were just getting close. We weren't there, but we were getting back to the funding levels that were there from 2008 for our community and technical college system. And there are about 740,000, 750,000 jobs in the near future who need skilled workers. And we need to make sure that we're maintaining and expanding our career and technical education programs and making sure we're working with industry to have the programs for students in the pipeline to be able to get those jobs. We also need to make sure, and the last recession taught us quite a bit about cutting wraparound services or cutting guided pathway kinds of programs or cutting behavioral health services, and what that did to students' abilities to be successful and to graduate and retain themselves. And so there are a lot of things we could be doing, but we need to make sure that we have a strong system for workers to get retrained and to come to and take the lessons that we learned from the last recession and not raise tuition at astronomical costs where students then can't afford to attend. And so I think we'll take the lessons that we learned and apply those to this time, but it's going to be very difficult for post-secondary education, and making wise choices will be on the table as we assess in the College and Workforce Development Committee.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Tawana Nobles, and you will have 90 seconds to answer.
Racial justice is a leading social issue for college students. A report to the County Council confirmed that Black people are arrested at a disproportionate rate in Pierce County. As a member of the state legislature, what would you do to address racial justice?
Thank you. One, by making sure that I'm always affirming the data and the experiences. We have a problem when it comes to race in this country. It's a deeply rooted history, and we need to do something about it. Also, we at the Tacoma Urban League have been working in particular with community members because a lot of folks were looking for guidance. In fact, the Senate caucus came to me and asked that I be part of a presentation to them, and they simply wanted to know, as the leader of a Black-led organization, what do I recommend? What do I anticipate coming down the pipeline? And so I thought it was important to let them know, what the community is looking for, especially as we talk about, racial justice and law enforcement, is accountability and transparency and increased training. But also as a community, it's so important that we focus on economic reform, that we also focus on institutional racism as a whole in every system. So I just dropped in the chat a document that we put together as a coalition with other Black-led organizations for folks who continue to ask, what can I do? But I will be a leader in these conversations. I will produce toolkits, documents, hold conversations, but I will train individuals who want to lead in our community on the issues, what the data is saying, and how to be really good allies and really good leaders in this work if we're really going to fight for racial justice. So I don't, I love these questions because so much of it, what I want to say to you, because I think I'm going to have to leave early. I have 3 more events tonight, is that so much of this work is, I know you all want to know what we will do, but I'm committed to you. I'm doing this work in the community and I'll keep doing it. I just get another level of being able to create policy for the community as a lawmaker. So I'm looking forward to that level of accountability.
Yeah, thank you. Mari Levitt.
Thank you. And I too have been working on this issue, and I wasn't surprised by the report that came out to Pierce County. And I wish Pierce County had started looking at these issues a lot sooner than when George Floyd, when the death of George Floyd happened, because we've known for a long time in our K through 12 system the disparities of discipline for students of color, in particular boys of color, in the educational system. And we've known for a long time that there's health disparity across our county for people of color. And we've known for a long time, there was just a report that came out at WSU where Black males were stopped more often by police officers at Washington State University in Pullman than others. And I've asked for discipline records and data across the board for our system as a result of that report that just came out. And so I was proud, like I said, to support the I-1000 bill that we had in this past term. I was proud to co-sponsor the Office of Equity, proud to work on racial justice issues, and we'll continue to do that in police accountability. That's going to be a focus of this next term. It's going to be a primary focus of the 3 COVID-related items. Police accountability and budget will be the top 3 focus of this next term. And we need to do more in Pierce County, working with our community partners and raising those voices up. And that's why I'm really proud to be endorsed by the Tacoma-Pierce County Black Collective and continue to do that work.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
Okay, I'm speaking to you as a former law enforcement officer just south of Oakland, California in the East Bay, hugely racially diverse community. And so I have some life experience when I weigh in and I make decisions on how I would legislate or what sort of programs I would support. When it comes to racial justice, in my city of DuPont, I sit on the Public Safety Commission. And in accordance with the latest legislation that was passed, we were to develop a committee, a civilian committee of 2 members to oversee any officer involved death, a shooting, or maybe a George Floyd scenario where the person wasn't able to breathe. But in other words, an officer involved use of lethal force. And it was important that we put a person of color on that citizen committee because we wanted to make sure, because we recognized, and this person is also an active duty service member, we also recognize that we have a hugely populated percentage of active duty military in our community. So everybody needs to be represented. I just feel like also the implementation of body cameras in DuPont was a big thing that I supported because transparency begins to get us to a landscape where transparency is there from the time of interaction with the civilian to the time of the end of contact. And we need that in our society right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
So there's no question, as a legislator, we are going to play a critical and key role in making sure that we strive to achieve racial justice in the state of Washington. And that's something that I very much look forward to working on because it's something that I truly believe in. And racial justice is all encompassing, as we all know, right? It comes to, it involves housing equity, it involves fair access to good paying jobs. It involves educational equity. It involves, and certainly equity when it comes to interactions with law enforcement. And I've been looking a lot into this particular issue also. I'm not a law enforcement officer myself, but I work across from law enforcement quite often as a firefighter and first responder. So I want to look at this specific issue very critically and very precisely to come up with ways to address racial inequities between interactions of law enforcement in our community. So I've been reading papers by like the Center for Policing Equity, for example, that provides step-by-step suggestions on how to engage the community to make sure that we feel safe in the communities that we live in, and that goes for everyone. And also, there's a big gap in collection of data, use of force data for law enforcement officers. There's a huge disparity amongst local municipalities and law enforcement agencies with a lack of body cameras, and that data collection piece is going to be very important to make sure we address this very important issue.
Thank you. For our next question, we will begin with Mari Levitt, and you will have 90 seconds to answer.
The Washington Education Investment Act fully funded state-based aid for students seeking higher education. In light of the expected revenue shortfall, what will you do to ensure that students have access to the funding they need to go to college?
Thank you for that question. And I worked on that bill in terms of helping identify the variety of different things that bill supported, whether it was working connections and childcare, adding slots over on the east side in medical school, guided pathways for community and technical colleges, free college for those who are family of four of 53,000 or less, and making sure that program and that act is able to stay whole for the Washington College grant in particular, as a scaled up opportunity for our students and their families will be a priority. I will have to see what the funding levels will be. We may come up short. I think that's the prediction that's going to be. And the first priority within the Washington Education Investment Act will be the Washington College grant. It's the first time in this state. And it's really a leader in this country in terms of an entitlement program for higher education. And I talked about the Great Recession in the past. It's the first time we've been able to ensure that those with the lowest income levels have opportunity for colleges. And so we'll look to make sure that fund stays whole, but the ancillary kinds of programs within that is going to be a challenge. And that raised salaries for our hardest to find nursing faculty and welding faculty. Believe it or not, it's really hard to find welding faculty who are willing to take a pay cut to work in a welding program. And so making sure that we're taking a look at for faculty salaries also will be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
And now, for me personally, it's kind of hard to weigh in on something that really hasn't come to fruition. Something that was just created. We haven't seen the outcomes yet. I stated in an earlier question that I would not support any cuts to post-secondary education or the sorts of programs that would support equity of outcome. So to the extent that I could support the specific program that provided targeted funding for individuals seeking higher education that could not afford it, I would support it wholeheartedly. But the ancillary programs surrounding it may have, they may not be as protected in the legislature. So, I'm a voter like you at this point. I'm not yet a legislator. My ability to weigh in on legislation that's been passed as someone who's participated in the process just isn't there. So where my heart stands. I certainly wish for people that don't have the same economic outlook as others to have the same opportunity. And to that extent, I would not support cuts other than what would be necessary to keep that program established.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Mari Levitt, and you will have 90 seconds to answer. You may ask your question, Ivy.
Would you support tuition-free public colleges in Washington State? Why or why not?
Well, the Washington College grant program does that for those at, like I mentioned, a family of four at $53,000. And then it scales up to different percentages beyond that. And I support that effort. I don't support free college for everybody with high income levels who can afford to pay. But I certainly support the premise of the Washington Education Investment Act that really focused on those with the highest need to be able to do that. I don't support massive tuition increases. I think that we learned that we were really pricing students out. It used to be that 2/3, 1/3, students paid about 1/3 and the state paid about 2/3 many years ago. And then it was starting to get tilted to the other side. And it's starting to get back to a more even and less so for students in terms of the cost. But I think the other thing to remember for students, it's not just the cost of tuition that's part of the challenge and why so many of our students are in debt, whether they're a worker going back for retraining or others. It's all of the other kinds of costs, whether it's textbooks, and I supported bills that lowers and did open source textbooks. It's emergency services that folks need to be able to do, and all the other kind of wraparound programs, transit. All of those things are what add up to the full cost of tuition. And that's why I proposed a tuition transparency bill so that students and their families, when they're sitting at their kitchen table, know what it is they're doing, what program, and what the costs will be over a period of time in order to plan accordingly.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Yeah, so I would just like to mirror a little bit what Representative Levitt just said, where what we have in place that allows lower income students and their families to effectively have free college under a certain income level is very important, and we absolutely need to maintain that policy. Yeah, I mean, if someone, let's be honest with ourselves, there are families in our community that have a certain degree of affluence that can afford to pay to send their children to college without having to take out student loans, and that's great, and they should be able to do that. We, with a very finite fiscal resources, we really need to put that focus on lower income students and their families. So that way we, again, really address the inequities in education between more affluent families and students and those that are less affluent. So we, again, need to continue to look at ways to expand this. Perhaps we can increase or ratchet up the amount of tuition aid for students to go up to higher income levels. Yeah, those families that are affluent enough to pay certainly do need to pay their fair share when it comes to tuition and higher education.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
My education meant a lot more to me because I had to pay for it myself. I was in a position to do so. And so a blanket providing free education for all is not something I would support. For those economically disadvantaged, currently targeted with legislation that was recently passed, I believe that they should receive these sorts of benefits. The other group that I would support for 100% free education would be our 100% disabled military veteran community. Now, currently, they're placed in a similar situation where they have to meet a certain financial economic strata in order to qualify for free tuition. But I believe that needs to be removed. I'm not naive to the fact that there are numbers associated with opening up the gates to allow for more. But that would be another group that I would certainly look to provide free tuition-free education in our state. I just, people that have put their skin in the game need to be recognized and rewarded. I'd like to keep specifically our veteran population with good careers and educational opportunities right here in the Puget Sound region. We have, a great economic opportunity in JBLM. They need to stay here and contribute with their families. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been brought to my attention that I may have overlooked Dan Bernosky for that question.
Oh, you know what? I think I did get missed. This was the state-based aid for higher education question, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I can repeat the question if you'd like.
Well, I can address it. I think I
Sure.
get the point of the question. So I think this reflects very well with what I mentioned earlier about the state's currently made investments in higher education, that infrastructure that's in place, because we understand, again, that this is an investment in our community. It's an investment in you. It's an investment for your places of employment. So if we were to go backwards or regress when it comes to this investment in state-based aid for higher education for students, we would lose that return on investment, and we would be paying for it years down the road. So again, this is another one of those infrastructure pieces that needs to remain in place because the consequences would be dire if we regressed on these investments that are already there in this infrastructure capacity. So that's my I'll try to, that's my brief answer to your question. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for our next question, we will begin with Dan Bernosky, and you will have 90 seconds to answer the question.
How will equity, diversity, and inclusion guide your legislative agenda?
So this is something I believe in as a member of the community. This is something that I believe in as a advocate for workers, as a labor advocate, to make sure that workers are treated equitably. So this is something that I live and I breathe, and I'll absolutely take with me into the legislature. I know that I recognize that I've had it pretty good in my life. I have had a very privileged life to be able to allow me to run for state office in the first place. And I recognize that. And what I want to do is make sure that, my opinions and my voices aren't overshadowing the voices and opinions and life experiences of other people. So I will certainly sit back and listen. It is going to be my role as a legislator to listen to the community and what their needs are. And if there are inequities that need to be addressed, work with stakeholders to find good policy to make things more equitable for every member living in our community. So it's something near and dear to my heart. I believe in it. I practice it. I can always do better. It is work that will continue, probably long past after I am gone. That is just the reality in the United States of America, and that's okay. I commit to continue to work towards equity, and I will do that as a legislator. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Ballard.
Well, on a micro scale, I've been able to write some resolutions that have been passed by my city council in DuPont. And everything that I write, every vote that I make is measured by the yardstick of how is this equitable to everyone on all scale and on every scale. So this is a brief answer for me. It's just a no-brainer. My yardstick is total equity, and that will be the yardstick by which I make all my decisions as a legislator in Olympia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mari Levitt.
And I just want to shout out to Melissa, because that's the life that I live with my little ones too, of having children in the background. But I will continue the work as a legislator as I have been since this past term and have been my entire career, whether it was looking and recognizing a developmental disabilities program that's one of the only entitlement program for human services, and making sure that program was reaching out to a variety of different communities that folks knew it was an entitlement program and that they had a right to access those services, and not just those who happen to have a primary physician, because not a lot of families do. I'll continue to take a look at environmental justice, whether it's through climate change. Climate change is tied to health disparity, and areas of polluted water, poor air quality, increased rates of asthma, and all of those issues are tied together, of making sure that we're looking at those issues with an equitable lens. I'll continue that work in education and making sure that we're taking a look at our discipline processes and all of those areas in both education and post-secondary education. I'll take a look at it from a mom of 2 African-American children, who really, what happened with George Floyd, I took that personally, because I know that our son is going to have conversations and be a part of things that our other sons haven't had to address. And so I will continue to take both my personal experience, my life experience, and also the work that I've done over 26 years, continue to take that to the legislature and work on issues that are important.
Thank you. And for our next question, we will start with Kevin Ballard, and you will have 90 seconds to answer this question.
Recent studies have shown that over 70% of college students have challenges finding affordable health insurance. What healthcare reforms would you support to increase access to quality, affordable healthcare?
Well, I'm going to continue to support anything that has to do with transparency and billing, because nobody likes that surprise bill that shows up. When you show up to the hospital and you're having a COVID test, and the next thing you know, you receive a bill for $19,000. You begin to question would you have gone to that hospital to begin with if you knew that charge would have been levied to you for whatever reason? But this happens to people in the United States, and it happens to students that go and seek healthcare options. So this whole transparency in billing is very important to me. That's something that I would pursue legislatively or add upon, because there are a number of legislative items that have been passed that address this. Secondarily, I would like to look to the insurance commissioner to help any way we can to provide a framework legislatively whereby people can customize their insurance plans. Right now, you kind of get like all in one package, or you get like nothing. And it's very rare that you can customize what you need for yourself. As a young person, you don't need the same things that an 85-year-old diabetic would need. So being able to customize these plans would make it more affordable to you. And I look forward to working with the state insurance commissioner to kind of see if we can set up a legislative framework to watch.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Thanks. So there's no question that we need to continue to expand access to healthcare, but most importantly, we need to be able to make sure that healthcare is absolutely affordable. You know, it does no good to have, you know, that healthcare accessible if it's not also affordable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with stakeholders to come up with I'm going to work with stakeholders to come up with out-of-the-box solutions to expand access to this affordable healthcare. And I think what a good policy was that passed last session was Senator Emily Randall was working with a local community in Key Peninsula, a rural community that literally had no doctor's office on the entire Key Peninsula. So what could they do? Well, they found what Point Roberts up in the border with Canada did, where their local fire station was able to lease out their space to a local healthcare provider to incentivize that particular healthcare provider to either stay in the community or set up shop in community where there was not access to that healthcare to begin with. And that was a really good bill because it really had no fiscal impact on the state health system. And it was just really outside of the box, forward thinking to mesh a couple of community services that already existed. One, the fire service and EMS service with a local healthcare provider. So, you know, is that entirely applicable to all of us here in Tacoma? Probably not, but that was a unique out of the box bill that I think is going to do a lot of good for that certain community. And I think there's a lot of parallels between that community and ours that we can look at critically to come up with a better, more affordable health for us.
Mari Levitt.
Thank you for the question. As a former trustee of the Pierce County Accountable Communities of Health and really on the group that helped form that committee, I know too many across Pierce County don't have access to quality health care. I just recently worked with our healthcare authority because there's a proposal to cut Medicaid for adults, dental patients. And we know that oral health care is tied specifically to physical health care. I worked to get a community dental clinic at one of our local school districts in the 28th to partner with a community primary clinic that had also just opened to make sure that there are access to quality care at our schools in order for kids to be healthy and then get back to learning. I've been working on food security issues. You know, food insecurity is directly tied to learning. It's directly tied to healthcare and making sure we have access to quality meals for littlest learners and adults alike. And I'll continue to take a look at, the cost of healthcare overall and make sure that it's equitable, because if you're a person of means, you can go to a high quality and you have access to a network that's pretty prevalent and fairly wide. If you're a person on Apple Care, you're limited to the scope of the network, and the network isn't that great for many, many families, both in oral healthcare as well as primary physical care, and have been working on those issues and will continue to address those. Coupled with the fact that there's just disparity across our healthcare system and we need increased access.
Thank you. And this will be our final question this afternoon. And we will begin with Kevin Ballard, and you will have 90 seconds to answer the question.
What would you like to do to increase affordable housing for students?
To the extent that as a legislator, I could impact affordable housing for students, what we could do is reduce regulation and fees for developers, create incentives to local communities so that developers can apportion percentages of their developments to low income or marginal income student population type incomes, so that an actual percentage of that development would be developed specifically for people in your income bracket presently, prior to having a professional career. We would want to maintain the infrastructure surrounding campuses so that the current housing that the state system has is well maintained, and to the extent that we don't lose any housing for current students on our various campuses around the state. So that's very important as well, and make sure that the living standards and the regulatory standards for those student housing facilities are maintained to standard, so students remain healthy. So those are the sorts of things I would support as a legislator.
Thank you. Mari Levitt.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I serve on the Housing, Community Development, and Veterans Committee and focus quite a bit on housing. I introduced a bill to allow our self-help developers to expand units all across our states that was signed into law by the governor that helps families in Pierce County. I was able to secure $1 million for a teen homeless shelter because we know that our teens, foster children, and LGBTQ students in particular have highest rates for teen homelessness, and will continue to work on youth homelessness in particular. I was able to and continue to work on multifamily exemption tax reform. And what that means is that you provide incentives for developers and others to make sure that you're doing affordable housing. But a study just showed that it was inconclusive whether those incentives were actually producing affordable housing units. So we need to hold those folks accountable to make sure that those are yielded. I worked on making sure that we have student housing and options, not only just for student housing, but for faculty and staff as well, and introduced a bill to create housing, affordable housing on our public lands and on our public property. And finally, making sure that we, in everything we do, we have an affordable housing lens whenever we have public dollars. And I'm working on veterans housing because we have a dearth of veterans housing in Pierce County. And I'm working with the WDVA and other community partners to see if we can expand our veterans housing, both for our veterans, but also workers we know who are coming back for retraining need housing as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
Yeah, so there's no question that affordable housing for students is an issue, and affordable housing for everyone in our region up and down the I-5 corridor is a huge issue. There's not enough of it. There's not enough housing stock at all. Well, not enough housing stock to facilitate everyone, driving up the cost of housing. So it's a real challenge. And, when I look at housing affordability specific to students, I mean, we all know, we're all in this room, that no two students are the exact same. I mean, some of us has families, some of us still live at home, some of us are, working and trying to be able to go to school at the same time to get an education, to get a better paying job. So this affordable housing piece is part of the same, is very similar to the piece where there's inequities in healthcare, inequities in pay. So this is another one of those inequitable things in our region that certainly needs to be addressed. It has to be addressed. And I know there's a lot of good subject matter experts out there working right now very diligently to try to make more housing and more affordable housing in our local community. And I think that those policies are absolutely going to be able to benefit you as students, just like it's going to benefit all of us living in the region. So it's a huge issue. It's going to be a priority for all of us, and it's not going to go away unless we tackle it head on. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, candidates, for taking the time to answer our questions today. And now it's time for closing statements, where each candidate will have up to 1 minute, and we will reverse the order of the opening statements. And so we will begin with Mari Levitt.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Tacoma Community College, associated students, for hosting this forum. and asking really important questions that are being asked all across our community. And so I appreciate that, and it's an honor to be with you. You know, we're facing a crisis unlike any other, and we need unity and leadership to bring folks together to address the challenges that we face. We are facing challenges, and while we have policies, we need to adapt those policies and be flexible, whether it's in healthcare and continuing to improve healthcare access, whether it's supporting our schools and families and taking a look at jobs and workers to be able to get back to work and having access to childcare in order for them to do that. And then also whether it's making sure that we're taking care of our seniors and our most vulnerable, that they have access to healthcare, and those essential workers and workers all across our community, if they get sick, that they have access to testing and treatment in order to get back to work. So it's an honor to be with you, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Ballard.
Well, thank you, TCC students. There may be some video of me in college tucking Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro into their limousine when they were running for president and vice president of the United States. So I appreciate the involvement of you students in this political process. I just want to speak briefly. I wish for our government in Washington to be a little bit more bipartisan in the robust debate that needs to happen up there. We're seeing one-party governance in our state kind of drive us into an echo chamber, and specifically in the 28th, that's very kind of 50-50 balanced. We need those outcomes to kind of represent what's going on in the 28th. So that's why my voice is important and will be important in Olympia. You know, balance is what's key. And I just appreciate the fact that I had a voice today with you. And I look forward to serving you as your next legislator. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Dan Bernosky.
So I can't thank all of you enough for being here this afternoon, taking time out of your busy day to be so civically engaged. I mean, this is above and beyond what many of us, certainly when I was a college student, above and beyond what I was, how I was engaged civically. So I'm really honored and privileged to be here. I can't thank you enough. So now the true work begins, right? You're gonna talk to your fellow students, you're gonna talk to your friends and family members about the importance of voting, the importance of making sure that their ballot is in hand if it hasn't been done so already, making sure that people are registering to vote if they haven't done so already, because your voice is absolutely critical this year, just as it has been for generations before us. But this is a critical election, and we can't do it without you. We can't do it without your help. So thank you so much for that civic engagement piece. And I know you're going to go out there and spread the word to vote and register to vote and get your friends and family to vote. And that's all we can ask for. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And that concludes our candidate forum. Thank you all for participating. And I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for supporting this forum. And thank you also to our timekeeper, Sonia Morgan. And I would like to also thank the student panel, Melissa, Carter, and Ivy. And I would also like to thank Dr. Harrell and Bill Ryberg for your awesome support also. And for viewers, please be sure to vote for the candidate of your choice before Election Day, November 3rd. You should have your ballots already. Please mail or use the drop box to deliver your ballot as early as possible. Be sure to read your pamphlet, your voter's pamphlet, and to look up vote411.org, where you can find answers to questions posed to the candidates. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.